Microphone. Testing. All right. Well, everybody, if I could get your attention, and if you're out in the lobby, if you could move on in, we'd like to get this session started. We're going to start with some announcements and information that is really important to you. We announced this morning that we're going to be at Ridgecrest next year, October 23 through 26. And, Ridgecrest, not to put you on the spot, Rebecca, but Ridgecrest has sent us some swag. All right. So, anybody like a water container? Great. Here you go. All right. Let's see what else we have from Ridgecrest. A braided bracelet. Okay, I don't know what to do with this. Carol, those are for you.
Oh, that's awesome.
All right.
All right, keep me warm, yes.
Let's see. Bev, here. That's from Ridgecrest. There you go. If you're really committed to Ridgecrest and you wouldn't mind, this goes on your phone. Who wants this for your smartphone? There you go. And you remember yo-yos?
Yeah,
You remember yo-yos? There you go. All right. Such a lot of fun. You know what SWAG stands for?
Yeah, stuff we all get.
Stuff we all get. And it doesn't really apply because you didn't all get anything.
That's okay, we didn't even.
So, sorry. Patrick, come up here and tell us what you have learned in the last 24 hours that is really important for us.
Yes. So some of you guys know Mike and Carrie McKenzie, longtime therapists and CEO and everything of Marble Retreat, my professors that I studied under at Lincoln Seminary. Mike has written a book through InterVarsity Press, and so it's about to come out. I think November 7th is the date I understood, but it might even be November 1st. But here's the thing. What helps a book a lot is the people that are part of the launch team, that will say something about it within the first days after it's released on Amazon, on Goodreads, or whatever else. People that are experts at caring for pastors, those are the best. And so he needs a launch team that would help. What he wants to do is send you a free copy of the book by PDF so that you can be looking that over or reading it if you get the chance, but looking it over enough that you can write a response, and that's the only promise you have. So if you'll go ahead and put the book up there, it's called Don't Blow Up Your Ministry. He wasn't a big fan of that title. When I first asked him about it, he said, but that was IVP. He said, no, this is the title. I think he had some academic sounding name, and so that one's pretty plain. And it's built of all the years of their care there at Marble Retreat. But you have to email him to get the free copy of the book. And I think, I'm not certain, once you email him, he'll fill you in more on the details. But it's Michael C. McKenzie, so remember the C in the middle there, at yahoo.com. So if you'll write that down or put it in your phone right now or start a text or an email to him right now on your phone, then immediately you'll get a PDF back. Or fairly quickly, and that way you can look over the book, have your own copy of it on PDF, and then when it comes out, when it's actually published, there's not the physical copies, I guess, are being printed at this moment, so it'd be tremendous help. Yeah, take a snapshot of that maybe. That's another way to do it. Jim over here is very smart. All right, guys. If you have any questions, anybody have a question about it? I'm going to give it to you. I'll give it to you privately. I think Mike needs all the help he can get right now. He told me, we were just in a conversation, and he said they encourage hundreds of people to be on your launch team. And Mike is not a promoter at all. In fact, last night I'm laying in bed, and I went, we should be talking about this. And so I texted him. I said, Mike, how could we help you, with your book coming out? And he goes, oh yeah, that's a great idea. So anyway, I think he's got 20 or 30 people on the launch team. But and now if you guys go all do this, it'll be more like the 100 that IVP was telling him was important to have. So thank you.
I would encourage you when you get this PDF. I haven't seen it yet, but I've been a part of this kind of thing before. Pick out a subtitle, a chapter title that interests you. Go and read that one and make a comment about that. He needs this quickly. You don't have time to read the whole thing unless you're, completely at your leisure and you can spend 2 days wading through this. So just encouragement to do that. Any other announcements we need to make? I love it. All right. Let's have a word of prayer together. Heavenly Father, we're exhausted, and yet we anticipate great things from you. We so appreciate what Matt shared with us this morning, and we pray that you'd give him the ability to communicate to us this afternoon and give us ears to hear what we need to hear. And may together we honor and glorify you as we learn more about how you've wired us and how the sinful, broken world we live in screws all that up. Because we want to help, and we want to be better prepared. So allow us to experience that together, we pray, in Jesus' name. Amen. Matt?
Let's see, input. Which input? I'm sorry, I'm totally not. Oh, it's source.
Yeah. I'll take care of it.
Okay. All right, so we're going to talk about mental wellness and coping, and then also talk about compassion fatigue and its counter of compassion satisfaction. So all right, so a stress response. When a threat is perceived, stress hormones are released from the adrenal glands, cause the individual to go into a fight or flight response. So that's really what we're talking about here in the context of somebody getting compassion fatigue or secondary trauma, or however we want to describe it. We're talking about a person having a stress response. And certainly a stress response is normal, but it's not supposed to be something that goes on for a long period of time. If it goes on for a long period of time, it starts to damage you physiologically. And so glucocorticoids, the stress hormones that I mentioned there, they're actually neurotoxic. They'll cause damage to your brain, and they also will cause problems with your other systems, increased heart rate, things like that. And so you don't want to be in that for a long time. So a person who puts themselves in a situation where they're constantly being stressed out and a stress response is being generated, and they're not able to bring themselves down to care for themselves, they're in a dangerous situation because they're not going to be able to maintain that over a period of time. So coping is the cognitive and behavioral strategies that people will adopt to deal with difficult situations or difficult demands, or when we have, so we all get stressed. I mean, that's just a fact. So if someone were to tell you, well, you just need to take stress out of your life, I mean, that's just a foolish thing, because we're all going to have different things that stress us out. It's how we deal with them that's important. And so do you have the coping skills? Do you have resiliency that you've built up? Are you able to deal with them? So you have a stress response, you use that the way it's supposed to be used, and then you're able to bring yourself back down. And there are different ways of coping. We're going to talk about that. There's active coping and there's passive coping. So active coping, you engage the challenge, the difficult situation, you come up with new skills in order so that when the situation occurs in the future, you'll be able to deal with the stress, or perhaps that situation will never happen again. You actively are trying to solve the issue, the problem, to make sure that it doesn't happen again. That's the least likely approach that most people take. Most people don't want to deal with their external issues or the things that are causing them stress. They may take a passive coping approach, which is you try to suppress the stress that you're having by distracting yourself or or learning to just accept it. Passive coping, for instance, might be something like going and getting a massage. There's nothing wrong with that, okay? You're gonna relax while you're getting a massage, right? And when the massage is over and you go back to your house, whatever it was that was stressing you out is still there and still active, and you just get stressed out again, okay? But during that time you're getting the massage, you felt real nice, and you did do something. It was just more passive. Instead of dealing with whatever the issue was, which would have meant when you came home again, that wouldn't have been there, potentially. So positive coping, so we've got active and passive. So you engage the issue, or you kind of distract yourself, or deal with the stress momentarily. Both are fine, that you want to have some active also. There's positive and negative, okay? Those are much like they sound. Active and passive, neither is bad, okay? You just need to make sure you have some active. Positive and negative, positive is obviously very good, okay? Negative coping strategies we're gonna look at, those have their own negative consequences. They may help you deal with whatever it was stressing you out, but they have their own negative consequences as well. So here, passive coping strategies, talking with a friend or a loved one, practice relaxation techniques, prayer. Prayer is probably the most common of the coping strategies that people, when you ask them how they deal with their stress, when you ask terminally ill patients how they deal with their stress, prayer is always the primary thing that they will report. So all of these, you're probably familiar with all of these are positive coping strategies. They're not always necessarily active coping strategies, but they're positive coping strategies, and that's good. You want to adopt positive coping strategies. One of the biggest problems that people have is that whether you realize it or not, you have coping strategies. You have a whole set of them. Everybody else may know them better than what you know they are, okay? And so you may have some very negative coping strategies, but that's how you deal with stuff, okay? And so here's some positive ones. You might look on there and say, oh, I do that one. I journal, or I exercise, whatever. Okay, well, here's some negative ones. It's very common for people when they get stressed out to have a drink, okay? Does it help you calm down? Absolutely it helps you calm down. Does it make you feel better for a few minutes? Absolutely. But it has its own negative consequences. If you do that every time you get stressed out, that's going to lead to its own problem. And you're still not going to develop a strategy to deal with whatever it was that was stressing you out. Excessive spending, avoidance and isolation. You ever just go crawl into the bed and just go, I'm just going to crawl into the bed. It's nice and warm in there, lights out, nobody's in there. But whatever it was that was stressing you out is still out there somewhere, and you're going to engage it again. Overeating, very common. Americans are wonderful emotional eaters. We eat all the time, and you'll find yourself eating, and you don't even realize that you're eating. That bag of chips is real affirming to you. Self-harm on more the extreme end, people harm themselves, or just isolation in general, where they just keep themselves, the way I'm going to deal with my stress is I'm literally never going to be around anyone else. You ever know anybody like that? They just decide, I'm not going to be around anyone. I'm going to stay inside. I'm not going to talk to anyone. And that, again, just leads to its own problems. All of these are true coping strategies. They're just negative coping strategies, okay? So the person will tell you that these are helpful. Like I'm involved in, have you ever heard shopping therapy? So I go shopping. I know people, unfortunately it tends to be women, but they'll do that. I need to go buy something to make myself feel better. I've heard people say that. Well, that's what they're adopting here. Now the problem with that is it depends on how much money you have and what you purchase, and now you may have caused more of a problem, and ultimately that only deals with the stressor for a short period of time. So one of the first points here is this: when you're working with individuals that may be burning out and things like that, you need to help them determine how they cope with stress, because they do cope with stress either in a good way or a bad way. So sit down with them and say, when you get stressed out, what do you do? What do you do? Do you go hunting? Do you go see a movie? Do you isolate in your room? Do you eat? Go through and determine what their 3 to 5 common coping strategies are, and then talk to them about, well, these 3 are all negative coping strategies, but here you got one good one. None of them are active. You might talk to them about that. Do the same thing with yourself. If you know how you cope, then what you can do is you can say, oh, you know what? I do have a tendency to overeat when I get stressed out. So what I'm going to do is, it's not that I'm going to stop overeating. I'm going to replace overeating with a positive coping strategy. So when I get stressed out, instead of eating, I'm going to journal, or I'm going to go for a run, or whatever. Does that make sense? It's all about replacing the strategy with a more positive or active strategy, okay? What you don't tell somebody is, well, when you get stressed out, you eat, so you need to stop doing that. Because what they'll do then is they have no compass. They'll say, okay, I'm not going to stop, I'm not going to overeat. And maybe they start drinking. Or maybe they, do you know what I'm saying? I mean, you've not directed them towards where they should go. So you want to give them some positive strategies. All right, so now there is religious coping as well, okay? And so this is actually a scale that's been developed called the brief RCOPE, religious coping strategies. And so people can use religion as a positive coping strategy or as a negative coping strategy. So with the people that I work with, they will say things like, well, I think the reason I have depression is God is punishing me. You know, God has, you know, I did something wrong and he's punished me. Or maybe he really isn't a good God. Or maybe I just didn't do enough good things. Or so it's always, you know, God is a punitive God, and God's left me. He's gone off. He doesn't hear me anymore. He's not present. He doesn't care for me. So that's the negative coping strategy approach, okay? The positive coping strategy approach is that God is present with me in this. God will empower me through this. You know, God is walking along with me. So God is there as a comforting presence, as a guide. I mean, he is present in my suffering, but he's not the cause of my suffering. Does that make sense? So what you have to understand is a person who adopts a negative coping strategy, a negative religious coping strategy, they have worse mental health outcomes than those who adopt a positive. So if you've got a pastor or a missionary or somebody you're working with, and they're saying, well, maybe God is just punishing me. Maybe God has just left me. If you're hearing those kind of things, or the types of things that are listed here, then what they've adopted is a negative, and you need to turn that to a more positive. Now, so religion or faith can be a wonderful positive coping strategy, but it also can be a horrible negative coping strategy that makes it go just the other way. Does that make sense? So while we look to our faith as a foundation, if we're looking at God as more of he's punishing us, he's causing this, I did something wrong, I just wasn't faithful enough. You know, again, there's a lot of legalism in that kind of discussion there, but when you're doing that, basically what you're doing is you're setting up this impossible scenario where you already failed him, and now you're just going to fail him again. So he's no longer there. So not only are you dealing with stress, God has rejected you, and so now you're done. So it's important to turn that negative strategy to a more positive strategy. You know, what I'll talk about tonight is the idea of a more, as opposed to an authoritarian God, more of a benevolent God, a God who's present and engaging and loving and wants to know you, as opposed to one who just wants to boss you around, has a bunch of rules for you, and you better follow them or he'll smack you, that kind of a thing. So, and I will tell you that when people get stressed out, even the most faithful people, our human tendency is to go in the negative direction. It is just to go towards these negative coping strategies and to kind of, in a sense, redefine our faith that we've held on to for a long, long time. And the first question people start to ask is God really good? How could this have happened? Which implies that, well, God is good if I do the right things, and then I must have done something wrong, and so God really isn't good because, and so you get into all of that kind of a discussion. So these are some things that I recommend, not only to my clients, but to everyone. I think these are just a really important, just for mental wellness in general, developing a routine and schedule. When you are working with someone and they have no schedule, no routine, it's just a fly-by-pants kind of, whatever, they are the ones that are most affected by what, the waves just kind of slosh them along. Routine and structure, particularly for children, adolescents, and for people that struggle with mental health problems, is life-giving, okay? Because they don't have to think about what's going to happen next. There's a structure to what's going on. Staying in contact with family and friends, making sure they have social support around them. People get themselves in trouble when they've pulled back and they've isolated themselves for some reason and they just don't have people to talk to. If you just have people to talk to on a daily basis, that is a tremendous social support that will allow you to just talk your problems out. And exercise, eating healthy, and again, exercise doesn't mean you have to be, some gym membership or something. Just, exercising 20 minutes 3 times a week, going for a walk, being more active, eating healthy, getting plenty of sleep. That's one of the biggest complaints we get at the clinic is people will say that their sleep is off. If people aren't sleeping regularly, it totally alters their neurochemistry and it causes a lot of issues. Prayer and spiritual growth, I mean, are they putting time in that, or has that become some kind of obligation where, I gotta have my that morning, quiet time, or I didn't spend enough time with God today, or, it becomes more of a negative strategy in its own right because it's like something I have to do. And so, what has that become for them? Are they doing that? Pleasure and enjoyable activities. Does this person ever take an opportunity to just go do something fun? Or is all their job or all their whatever, and they never are allowed to just step away from that and just enjoy themselves? So oftentimes I'll ask people, what was the last thing you did that was fun, that had nothing to do with your job? Because a lot of people say, oh, well, I enjoy my job. Well, do you go to a movie? Do you ever go out to dinner? When was something you just went away and had some fun? And then check it on your neighbors. If a person takes the time to check on their neighbors and check on their friends, then that's the kind of person that will build up those relationships, and then they'll have those opportunities to discuss. So all of these are just good kind of rules of thumb for people just to have general mental wellness. And I like to kind of go through these with people and say, which of these do you do? Because usually when they come to you, they don't come to you because things are going well, okay? And if they did, that would be a very short meeting. Hey, way to go, and so they usually come to you because things aren't going well, and they are way down the road of a mess. So they're involved in a bunch of negative coping strategies, they're overwhelmed, they're falling apart, and you really have to kind of rebuild it all for them. You have to train them what they're doing now and why that's not working, and then you have to help them understand what are things they can substitute. So you overeat. Look on this list of positive coping strategies. Which is one of these that you could do in place of overeating? You like to drink every time you get nervous. Okay, what's one of the things you could do on here that's more, so help them replace that. And then then when you meet with them again, you can say, okay, this week when you got stressed out, did you drink? Well, I did twice, but the other times I did, you know what I'm saying? And that's what it is, it's a relearning. It's just a relearning. Because they've learned to adopt the wrong strategy. All right, so compassion fatigue. We hear that term a lot. I'm going to give you some other names for it. Experienced by those helping people in distress. So that potentially could be you, okay, but it also could be those that you work with. In extreme state of tension and preoccupation with the suffering of those being helped to the degree that it can create secondary trauma. So oftentimes this is referred to as secondary trauma or secondary victimization, vicarious traumatization, secondary survivor, empathy fatigue. All of these terms are used. But basically, you become traumatized because you're working with a person who's been traumatized, okay? Now, in the most obvious example of that, it would be like a frontline responder that goes into a disaster situation and, it's pulling bodies out of a building or something like that. But it also can be you sitting down and listening to the trauma that someone else has experienced. So you don't have to see it going on around you. It's just, my daughter is a social worker in a school district, and she has, she calls and tells me these horrible stories of these children that are being abused or neglected and not taken care of. And you just want to get in your car and go over there and find their parents. And, and the thing is that she has to do, but she can't do that. And I can't do that. And so, you have to deal with that you have to deal with all that trauma. You can't internalize that. So individuals that we work with, pastors, missionaries, even yourself, you're hearing these difficult things and you're trying to walk somebody through it. But if you begin to internalize it, it can begin to damage you. So ask yourself this, these are situations where compassion fatigue happens a lot. A large volume of demand, more clients, more paperwork, more problems. continually dwindling resources, exposure to difficult stories, loss. It's that weird little, pain. It looks different on my screen here. Pain, death, suffering, clients who face seemingly insurmountable obstacles, chronic need. I mean, that's a lot of us, what we deal with. And I like this little cartoon. It kind of reminds me, oh, this is fine. This is great. He's sitting there having his cup of coffee in a room on fire. Oh, this is awesome, And that's kind of how we do that. Like, we're like, oh, I'm the helper. This is great, I'm like, every person that comes in, it's just another disaster story of a life falling apart. And I'm the one that's supposed to help them walk through that, and I've got my own problems. Like I'm sitting here teaching you, and I've got my own problems right now. Do you know what I'm saying? And so how can I be genuine? Do you know what I'm saying? When I tell this person they need to make sure they adopt positive coping strategies, and I know that I use some negative ones, and so you really have to be careful with that. You really have to get yourself in a good place, and I really do believe the old adage, and you really can't give what you don't have, but you also have to give yourself a break. We're all broken, we're living in a fallen world. We're all going to have a mess, and so we're all in process, but you're not telling them. As long as you're not telling them something that you're not willing to do for yourself, I think you're being honest. I think if you're saying, yeah, you know what, you overeat, that's your coping strategy, and we got to switch that. As long as you're saying, you know what, I've recognized some overeating in my life, and I've worked to change that, I think you're being honest. You're not saying that you've never had a negative coping strategy. So I think you got to kind of let yourself off the hook on that. So recognizing compassion fatigue, okay? So you start to have distressing emotions, so you may go home and you may not be able to stop thinking about these stories that you've heard. You may go home and worry continually about the people that you're working with. Not a healthy worry, I've got to save them kind of a thing. This is horrible. I'm the only one. If I mess up, those kind of things. You start getting irritable. You start getting depressed yourself. You're down because all you're thinking of is all this negative stuff. You start to do the things that you probably see in their life, and that is they're not having times of enjoyment. You're not adopting, kind of active coping strategies. You're not taking care of yourself. Chronic physical ailments, a lot of headaches, stomach aches, things like that. Difficulty focusing or concentrating. And then avoiding work, calling in sick, coming in late. Now, you may not realize that you're intentionally avoiding work, but you find that you are avoiding. Because really what you're doing, that's your coping strategy. You're trying to avoid going back into that trauma situation that's damaging you so much. This is a real issue for anybody that's in a pastoral care or kind of mental health kind of profession, because, again, they don't normally come in and sit down and go, hey, I came to see you because I want to tell you how wonderful my life is and how everything's going awesome. Now, they might tell you that later after you've worked with them, but it's a long way to get there, okay? So being careful not to internalize these things, but watching for these in your own life, And the best way to watch for these is to make sure that your family and your friends are aware of what you're like normally, and that they're free to share with you, that your wife might say, hey, you've been really irritable lately, What's been going on? What have you been seeing a certain type of client or anything, those types of things. Now, there is a trajectory for compassion fatigue that you see here. I did not make up these names. These are names that were made up by others. And so this is kind of the trajectory. You start out with the zealot. The person is, they'll do anything without being asked. They jump into this because they are going to save the world. Now, most of us probably jumped into this because we felt like we were called and we were going to change the world and further the kingdom. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But that doesn't always last. Do you know what I'm saying? It's hard to remain a zealot your entire career. So that begins to wane a little bit. And then with irritability, beginning to cut corners, avoid client patience, increase in mistakes and lapses of concentration. And then withdrawal, loss of enthusiasm, clients becoming irritating, complaining about work and personal life. And then the zombie, hopelessness turns to rage, coworkers appear incompetent. So this is the person who's like, this is useless. These people are such a mess. I hate everyone I work with. I hate all the people that work at the organization. They're morons. that do you know what I'm talking about? Have you met these people? Absolutely. And then that's pathology and victimization. That is the secondary trauma. That is the compassion fatigue. Intrusive imagery, distressing emotions, that is what I just described. And so this is that kind of trajectory. It isn't that you just go and you start working with people and then just all of a sudden you're fatigued. There's a progression. So, for me, I always watch for do I have compassion for my clients or do I not like my clients? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, do I not want to be around them? Because that's a real sign that, I know that they're a mess and they're mentally ill and it's not their fault they're that way and they're very frustrating. But do I have compassion towards them? And not to say they don't frustrate me, but do I start to dislike them? Do I start to feel hopeless for them? That kind of a thing. And so if I'm doing that, then I'm moving down that road to fatigue. Because what's going to happen is I'm going to have somebody come into my office and I'm going to sit down with them. And in my mind, I'm going to go, this is an absolute meaningless interaction, hopeless. This person will never get any better. And then I'm going to start to internalize that as I'm not doing what I need to do. I'm the problem, that kind of a thing. And that's where it starts to really. So you want to kind of check where you might be on this. I think we all start out with the zealot. I think that's where we can help people in our organizations, because that young guy comes in and he's just on fire, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that, but you got to pace yourself. Do you know what I'm saying? Because it's much like a loving relationship. At the beginning of it, you're all lovey-dovey, and then some people think, well, that's going to last forever. That feeling, that goofy love feeling. And love, it changes. It changes. And so does your commitment to your job, the way it feels. And so I think that's important to help us when we're working with one another, particularly, and have new people. Now, it's not just about coping strategies. It is also about resiliency. And resiliency is supposedly what we've done as we've developed, and our parents have helped us, and our teachers and pastors, and they've helped us obtain a capacity to be able to adapt to changing and stressful situations, okay? Now, I will tell you one of the biggest problems in our society today is that we no longer do this with children. Children are not taught to be resilient to anything, okay? And they fall apart at the smallest little thing. And now you have young adults in their 20s that just fall apart. They're not able to problem solve. They just fall apart. And that is also part of the reason that we see, it's not the only reason, it's part of the reason that we see so much division, because no one is able to interact with one another because everything is catastrophized. There is, it's fixed, you fix this now or everybody's going to die, and so there is no resiliency anymore, and we don't. Now, part of the problem is our parents, the parents that are raising children now, they don't model resiliency for their children. They fall apart. And we've seen that really wonderfully through the coronavirus pandemic. Parents have not handled it well. You have young children, and, again, regardless of what your views are on vaccinations and masks and all that kind of stuff, if you have young children and you're out fighting some culture war when they don't understand if they're going to die or not from a pandemic that's going on, they can't conceptualize these adult arguments. And so you're not doing a good job helping them maintain a structure and a routine to where they're going to build resiliency on how to deal with stressful situations, because you're not dealing with it in a good way. So resiliency. So let's talk about building resiliency. Self-regulation. That's the first of the great resiliency skills, okay? And so that's your ability to monitor your physiology and your emotional output, and to be able to, and I think with babies a lot of times we kind of describe it as kind of self-calming. You can calm yourself down when you get agitated or when you get stressed out. That sounds very easy, but you would be shocked how few people can do that anymore, particularly adolescents and 20-year-olds. They get so agitated they cannot calm down. And so we don't teach our children how to do that. And so when you're dealing with someone, when you are when you're doing pastoral care or you're counseling them, you need to get a sense of their level of resiliency. How can they calm themselves when they get stressed out? is the stress you're looking at in this person, the average guy with some coping strategies and decent resiliency wouldn't be having a problem? That's what you got to ask yourself. Because if that's true, then you're going to need to, maybe you're going to need to become their parent and help them learn some resiliency. You see what I'm saying? It's not that, now if the situation is just some extreme situation that anyone would be overwhelmed in, you're going to help walk them through that. That's understandable. But if it's like what's happening to this person happens to everybody, and they've fallen apart completely, I got to figure out what's going on there. So one of the ways that we can help people learn self-regulation is through relaxation techniques. And there are millions of relaxation techniques. This is a very simple one that I like. It's just a starter, but there's lots of different muscle relaxation techniques, things like that. If a person who gets very anxious or irritable or agitated, if you can teach them relaxation techniques where they can take control of their physiology and calm themselves down, you have done them a great service. And so with Foursquare breathing, it's not Foursquare, the charismatic denomination with Jack Hayford. It's Foursquare breathing technique. Now, some of you got that joke, and some of you didn't. And those who got it, I'm with you. That's good. I'm with you. So and so it's breathing based on 4 seconds. Okay, that's why it's called Foursquare, and they draw in this little square. So you're going to teach them how to breathe in for 4 seconds. They're going to hold the breath for 4 seconds. They're going to exhale for 4 seconds. They're going to wait 4 seconds. So you're going to and you're going to count while they're doing this. And so you're going to say, breathe in for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, hold for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. And you're just going to have them start doing it, and then you might start doing it with them. When you take a breath, it slows down your heart rate. Okay, and then you're going to have them focus on the breath. As you breathe in this time, I want you to focus on nothing but my voice and the breath moving into your lungs. Okay, now you're holding the breath in, focus on the breath in your lungs. Okay, exhale, focus on the breath coming out. So you're kind of focusing them in a moment, and you're letting them begin to take control of their physiology. Now, this is not something that you just do when you're stressed out or just do when you're having a panic attack. You can. But what I encourage people to do is do these breathing techniques every day, maybe 5 or 10 minutes a day, because then you learn what it is to be relaxed. You would be shocked how few people know what it really feels like to be relaxed, even for a moment. So when you tell someone they need to relax, they're like, I don't know what that means. I don't even know. I've never been relaxed in my whole life. So they begin, and then they're teaching their body how to relax, okay? And so they have kind of a point to go to. So self-regulation. Like I said, you get online, you can find 100 different techniques for relaxation that, find one that you like or a few you like. And, muscle relaxation, breathing techniques, whatever. Even guided prayer can be used as a relaxation technique. But teach them a few relaxation techniques. Teach yourself a few relaxation techniques and help them learn self-regulation. Intentionality, that's the second resiliency skill. Understand how our fundamental beliefs and values, understanding our fundamental beliefs and values, and then actively living your life with those as values. And so this is where we get into purpose, okay? And so part of being resilient is knowing that you have a purpose in your life, and that you're working in that purpose, okay? Again, young people are desperate to find a purpose, okay? Most of them will say they want to change the world, but they don't have the necessary skills to go out and do that. They have a lot of passion, but they don't have any way of, so they want to get excited, and they want to go out and protest, and they want to do things, but there's no, what is your purpose and plan, and how are you going to get there? Well, we're just going to force everyone to change the way that they're doing that. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's not the way we thought about it in the past. I mean, and in faith, we certainly understand that God has a purpose for our life. So this is a wonderful opportunity to talk to them about, what is God's purpose for their life, and then what is their personal purpose in the context of that, and then, what you may find is that, well, I always felt my purpose was to do X, and that's like a completely different thing than what they're doing. Well, why are you not doing that? Well, just didn't seem really practical, whatever. I mean, so you may find a conflict, and so they're not resilient. So when things that what they're doing start to stress them out, they just kind of fall apart because it's not a core part of who they are. If you are working within your purpose, you can get hit by a lot of hammers and just keep saying, but this is what I know I'm supposed to be doing, and that doesn't bother me because I know there's going to be resistance. You see how that helps with resiliency? If you're just doing something to do it, it's easy to kind of whack you. So helping them find what their purpose is, and their purpose may not be in their job. Their purpose, they may be able to obviously connect to a higher purpose that God has for their life, and their job may be related to that. That's fine. But it may not be. But how are they engaging their purpose? Okay, so the third skill in resiliency is perceptual maturation. It is not the workplace that causes negative effects. It is the perception of the workplace. Okay, and that is so true. You've got to change your perception of what's going on. A lot of times I'll work with families will have a mentally ill loved one, and they will just fall apart. Certainly at first it's understandable, but then they're like, they just kind of give up and they just kind of shun the person. And part of the conflict that you find with them and their loved one is they have unrealistic expectations for the person. They think if the person just works hard enough, they can get just back to normal and everything will be good. And if they're not back to normal, then they're not working hard enough. And so helping them reevaluate what are their expectations for this person? What should they be? And here, with this idea of perceptual maturation, you have to change negative perceptions. And so here's just a few thoughts. Avoid becoming obsessed with outcomes, okay? I think maybe with a pastor that might be obsessed with the idea that, I know that God has called me to be the pastor of a church of 10,000. And I don't know why we only got 80 people coming on Sunday morning, okay? But I know, and he's just obsessed with that. He is absolutely obsessed with that. And then he's internalizing that. Do you know what I'm talking about? He's internalizing this, that is his fault. He's not doing something right, or he doesn't have the right people, but he's not, again, back to the idea of what's his purpose. What is your purpose? Is your purpose to be the pastor of a church of 10,000? Is that the purpose? I doubt that's the purpose. That's the outcome that he expected to see. Lots of perceived threat, very little real damage. So you relax your body, I say, up there. So, it's constantly, there's all these problems that are in my way to get to what I need to do or what I'm supposed to be. But really, at the end of the day, they're not that big a deal. They're not, no one's dying, I mean, it's like you catastrophize everything. Oh, my elder board. They won't let us do these people in the church, they're backbiting me all the time. Or my mission board, I need more resources. I can't get, you know what I'm saying? So everything is a problem. And when you're hearing that person they've lost the ability to move forward. And they're very quickly wallowing in this fatigue. Relinquish entitlement. You work as a professional care provider does not entitle you to any specific dispensations. All you can get from your decision to take on a helping role is the opportunity to fulfill your personal mission. So don't expect anyone to tell you thank you, okay? And all you can expect is to do the best you can, and that some people will be helped by that. That's it. I mean, that's it at the end of the day. Some people are not going to get better. Some people are not going to listen to you. Some people are going to do the opposite. Some people are going to be way beyond your pay grade, and you're going to have to pass them on to somebody else. But that's okay. That's okay. It's not this kind of, this entitlement idea that I went into this ministry and every person I see is going to be transformed. You just got to let that go. You just got to let that go. Or I've given my life to serving the Lord. And you start having those entitlement ideas there about what he might ought to do for you. And you know how we can fall into that. You got to let that kind of stuff go. In a social service organization, what you would see is a person, that came in as the zealot and they, did all this stuff, and then after time, they, I am the cog that holds this whole place together. If I went away, this place would come down. They need to give me a raise. They need to give me more time off. I need to have a bigger office. You see what, you know what I'm saying? That's that entitlement mentality. And again, then now you've set up a bunch of straw men that aren't going to be, none of these are going to be met. And then you're going to just hate the place you work, hate the people you work with, hate those you serve. Nothing is demanded of you at your work. You always have the final choice. That's a statement. That's not a question. You always have the final choice. If you don't like where you work, go work somewhere else. If you feel like the place you work does not provide self-care for you, like you've asked them, like, man, you are killing us here. We're overwhelmed. There's not enough support. I've had a lot of friends that were missionaries that they felt like their mission group was not providing the support in the field that they needed. And you know what? You don't have to stay there. I mean, I know that you may feel like you have to stay there, but the reality is if you've been put in a situation that's psychologically damaging, or your family's been put in a situation that is not safe, then you have another calling. You need to not be there anymore, okay? And so that's the other thing. And so if you're in a situation that you're just being crushed and you're being burned out and you're not given the resources, and again, I'm not saying that you're not short-staffed and you have limited resources. That's the helping ministries, okay? But if you just can't do your job and it's just psychologically damaging, well, you may need to move on to something else. And there's nothing wrong with that. Your workplace is always going to demand more from you than you can give and never be satisfied with what you do to accomplish it. Absolutely. I'm the boss where I work. I'm the CEO. And I demand more from myself than I'll ever be able to accomplish. I'm horrible to myself. I try to be very compassionate to my employees, but, I think they have their own personal goals of where they really want to help people. And so they kind of maybe put that off onto me as well. And so it is a limitless need. It's like a giant bucket that every time you scoop some out that you took care of, more fills in from the bottom. And you're going to scoop out your entire life, and the bucket's still going to be filled when you go away. And that's okay. That's okay. But you have to be okay with that. When you're not okay with that, that's when you start getting into these problems. When it's like, that bucket's going to be empty when I'm done, you're in trouble. Because I'll tell you right now, there's no way it's going to be empty, because we live in a fallen world, and for every person you help, there's 10 lined up behind them that are going to need help as well. But the wonderful thing is, all the people that you help, even if it's just one, that to me, that's how I deal with a lot of it. I look at it one person at a time. When I tell my employees all the time, when you can go home at the end of the day and you can say, today I helped somebody, regardless of what level of help that was, then that was a successful day, because you helped somebody. That's all you got to be able to say. I helped somebody find housing. I helped somebody get some food. I helped somebody with a conflict they were having. That is a good day. That is a good day. So these are kind of just changing those negative perceptions, because when you get into those negative perceptions, that's when you really start to hate the people you work with, hate the people you help, in those types of things. And so that's resiliency 3, is this idea of changing those perceptions. And then 4 is this connection and support. Feeling supported, heard, and cared about by colleagues is a crucial skill to maintaining resiliency and to combat compassion fatigue. You have to talk to the people you work with, okay? I mean, you just have to build a community there. If you don't have that, you need to build that. And if you can't get that from the people that you work with, then you need to find people that do the same thing you do and build that outside where you work. So maybe you have a monthly gathering or two of people that are involved in the ministry you're involved in. But I mean, you have others that are feeding you and saying to you, this is worthwhile. This is where God would have us be. This is making a difference. And so a lot of people don't have that. We are, especially in this country, tremendously isolated. We are individuals, and we work on our own, and we don't talk to people, don't make eye contact, go do your job, just be quiet, And so it is, a lot of people just don't have that. and then they find themselves in big trouble and they don't feel like they can share. So build that support. You know, even if you just find 1 or 2 colleagues where you work that you feel comfortable with, just talking to them outside of work about how you're doing, how they're doing, those types of things. That will help you build resiliency. And again, building resiliency, that's the way you got to think about that is if you do these things and you build resiliency, it's like a stored up tank of protection. So when the bad things come, you've got something to kind of buffer that. You don't have to just rely solely on your coping skills, okay? But normally in the past, we built resiliency in our children. We taught our children to have realistic expectations for the future. Work hard, don't be entitled. Maintain control of yourself. Be, self-regulate. I mean, we taught them these things in the past. Now it's like, what do you want? I'll get it for you instantaneously. And then you do that for them until they leave you, and then they're like, oh, well, I want this. Well, how do I get that instantaneously? I can't tell you how many young people have told me that they want to go be some big, run this company or this or that, but they do not want to start at the bottom. That is an insult. They know so much more. They have so much skill. That is insulting for them to go and start at a low-paying job and work their way up. I need to start. And so what they do, they don't go get a job because it's insulting. Or I'm going to start a company, and they'll spend years doing research on this company, but never start the company while they're still living with their parents. I see this all the time. All the time. And any kind of negative thing that comes up, they have no ability to cope with it. Everything's external. There's no internal problems. It's all external. If I can get all the external things under control, I'll be in charge. So resiliency is something that we can build up in our clients. And then self-care. I think one of the problems with self-care, well, self-care is very important, is a lot of times what we tell people like nurses and police officers and pastors is, well, you need to be involved in self-care. You need to take care of yourself. You need to think of yourself first, and you be healthy before you can help somebody else. And that's true, but we tend to put all of the impetus for them to make sure that they're healthy on them and that it's all up to them. And to some extent, self-care is, but I think we need to be more intentional with them. We need to help them care for themselves. And so, this is just taking an active role in protecting your well-being, and there's all kinds of ways to be care of yourself. But this is one of the big problems that happen is guilt. It's selfish to care about myself when so many people are having problems. So that I hear that from pastors all the time. Like, I'm not going to go get help. You ought to hear some of the stories I hear from my congregation. They really got it bad. Well, if you're saying that to me, then I know you're already on the slope to falling apart because it's just a matter of time. I should be worrying about others, not myself. I don't get paid to care about myself. My problems are minor compared to theirs. I mean, these are common things, this guilt that people have. There's no reason to care for myself. I need to care for others. God didn't call me to care for myself. He called us to care for others. Well, I was telling Vaughn last night as we were talking, we were driving along, Jesus regularly goes out and takes care of himself. He goes away all the time from people and takes his friends with him sometimes. He goes by himself sometimes. I mean, he literally wanted to get away from the crowds because they were driving him crazy. Okay? I mean, you got to understand. I mean, it wasn't some overly spiritual thing. He needed to get, they were overwhelming him, okay? Can you imagine thousands of people everywhere you go trying to get up close to you, and they're talking to you and they're telling you all their problems? And again, he would just take time away where he would care for himself and pray and spend time with God and spend time with his closest friends, and then he would come back. It always said he would come back, he'd be refreshed, be able to show compassion. And so there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. But we oftentimes make it seem like there's something wrong with it unless we do it as a regimented part of our spiritual life. Well, didn't you have your quiet time this morning, brother? Like, somehow that was going to do it, And so, like, how about, did you go take 2 weeks away to Florida and you just didn't think about this place anymore? I mean, that's what really may be needed, as opposed to putting it, when you put it in that, didn't you take your quiet time, what you're saying is this is a spiritual issue. If you just got your spiritual life a little bit better, you wouldn't be burning out. If Jesus was concerned about his mental wellness in his ministry, I don't think it's too far to think that we should be concerned about ours. I mean, so, and then I like this little one right here. This is the Kelly Clarkson song, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger." And then Dwight says, "False. What doesn't kill you can leave you in a paraplegic state." And that's true, okay? And so that's the thing. You hear this a lot, this idea that you just struggle through difficulties and it just makes you stronger. Oh, that's just awesome. How's that work for kids that have been neglected? Does that make them better and stronger? You know, I mean, how about, people that have been hurt by the church? Does that make them stronger? No. I mean, the thing is that you have to process those things. You have to work through those things. Can be debilitating and damaging. So let's not, this is kind of that martyr complex that, I have dedicated my life to serving these broken people, and my health is of no value and no importance. It is only them that matters. Well, I hate to tell you, but you're just not going to be around long enough to really. You could be around a lot longer if you take care of yourself, and you could help them a lot better if you take care of yourself. But you can still help some people, and they'll crush you, and you'll be gone way sooner than you need to be, and that'll affect your family and your spiritual life. And I mean, there's a lot of fallout from that. So different areas of self-care. This was a little bit new agey on the spiritual. Sorry about that, but I just kind of liked it was all in one. But it's not just spiritual. You don't need to just get in the lotus position with some candles. It's not just spiritual. There are other aspects you need. I think it's all spiritual. I mean, to me, physical, mental. I think that's all part of it. You have to do all of it. You have to take care of yourself physically. I mean, if you're just putting all your time into making sure you're spiritually healthy, but you're eating horribly and you never exercise and you're falling apart physically, that's going to affect your spiritual life. If you're not taking care of your social, you don't have any friends, you don't have anyone to talk to, you're not taking care of your mental life or your emotional life, you got to think of the whole person. God has made us body, mind, spirit, and relationships. I look at Luke 2:52, and Jesus grew in wisdom and strength and in favor with God and man. There's the 4 aspects of the person: body, mind, spirit, and relationships. And so you should be thinking about yourself from all of those perspectives. How am I doing physically? How am I doing mentally? How am I doing spiritually? How am I doing relationally? And then what can I improve? And then when you're working with your clients, you want to ask them that. How are you doing? Okay, I see you come here because you and your wife aren't doing so well. Well, how are you doing physically? Well, I didn't come here to talk to you about that. Well, that's important to me. Tell me how you're doing physically. Do you exercise? Have you gained weight? Have you lost weight? I mean, how are you doing emotionally? So you want to ask broader questions, because we're kind of facets of all of that. That's how God has made us, this union of all that.
Can I add one thing
Sure.
to that? I've started saying stewardship rather than self-care, because pastors are so legalistic.
Right.
If you say, well, not all of us, but I'll have some nuance here. And also the royal law.
Right.
Love God with all your heart, love your neighbor.
Right.
And we always leave the last part out.
Right.
And it's as yourself.
Right, and that Mark verse, when he's asked the greatest commandment, he says, love the Lord your God. And he talks about physical and non-physical parts of you. And then he says, love your neighbor yourself. That's the relationships. So it's all in that as well. And I think, that's something you can show them and say, well, look, you need to be, if you want to love God with your full self, you need to present yourself in a healthy way. If you're just falling apart, that's not what you want to do. Here's some self-care tips. I mean, again, most of these are pretty common sense. Plan time off from work. I mean, pastors are notoriously bad. Pastors, they run either into that. They're either never off, like the guy there's never a Sunday he's not in the pulpit, like he would never let anyone else stand there, or he's gone so much that you wonder if he still works there, okay? It's like, we have another speaker series going on with these outside speakers. Where is this guy? And then we're like, wait a minute, I don't get that much time off. Why does he get all that time off? So don't take your work home. That's for you guys. And for me, you gotta leave that at the office. You cannot take it home, okay? You cannot be sitting in your bed at night worrying about the client that you saw that day and wishing you'd said something different and then worrying about that until they show up again. I mean, that is going to just destroy you. Exercise, eat healthy, I have that on every slide. Commit time for meaningful leisure activities, things you enjoy. Do things you enjoy. Regularly connect and consult with your colleagues, maintain a consistent sleep schedule. People are horrible about sleep. So let me tell you how you're really supposed to sleep. I have a PhD in neuroscience, okay? This is how you're really supposed to sleep. You're supposed to go to sleep at the same time every night, regardless of whether you're tired or not, okay? You're supposed to wake up at the same time every day, okay? And you are supposed to, before you go to bed every night, you're supposed to have a sleep routine where you do the same thing every night before you go to bed, okay? You're not supposed to eat within 2 hours of going to bed. You're only supposed to sleep in your bed. Don't read in your bed. Don't watch TV in your bed. That's the place you sleep. Okay? Don't look at video screens for at least an hour before you go to bed, okay? And you will teach your body to sleep, okay? But that's not what anybody does anymore. And then we complain about the fact that we're tired all the time. And so spend time with friends and family. That's another thing that pastors and missionaries are horrible at. They don't spend time with friends and family. In fact, most often, most pastors tell you they don't even have any friends. They don't have any friends because they don't feel like they can be open with anybody. So, you know, I've known pastors that have done it different ways. They had like a small group that was a closed small group that, you know, not other people in the church could just join. That can, you know, and then they had some close friends in there. I mean, they're different, but they've got to have that. That's human. That's how God has made us, to be in relationship with each other, not to be in phony relationship with each other where, you know, you have unrealistic expectations of me because I'm the pastor and then I have to act like those are really true. Like, oh, my life is perfect and nothing's ever going to be wrong with me. You know, and so that's a recipe for disaster. Now, on the other side of compassion fatigue is the good stuff, okay? Compassion fatigue is the bad stuff, okay? Compassion satisfaction, that's the good stuff. That's what you go into it for, okay? That's what you hope to get out of it, and that's what you keep telling yourself you're getting, even when you're getting crushed, okay? And so the pleasure and satisfying feeling that comes from helping others, I mean, this is compassion satisfaction, but this is the cycle, okay? For a cycle of compassion. So you show compassion and empathy to someone, and when you show compassion and empathy to someone, it drains you. Who would agree with me on that? Okay? It drains you. And you have to care for yourself to be able to then have the satisfaction of continuing in this cycle, that you found that to be something that is life-giving to you. So then you have compassion satisfaction, and that drives you to go out and show compassion and empathy again, and now you have to take care of yourself. Now, let's say this. Compassion and empathy, no self-care, compassion satisfaction. Compassion and empathy, no self-care, compassion satisfaction. Compassion and empathy, no self-care, the beginnings of compassion fatigue. Compassion and empathy, no self-care, compassion fatigue, no compassion and empathy. Compassion fatigue, compassion fatigue, compassion fatigue. And that's what happens. But this is the cycle. When you show compassion and empathy towards others, to care for others, you have to care for yourself some, because you're giving of yourself, okay? And they are taking. They are needy. That's why you're there, okay? That's okay. But you got to fill the tank back up a little bit. Then this becomes a very pleasurable experience, and you gain a lot out of it yourself, okay? But if you start not caring for yourself and then these other things happen that I've talked about, then compassion fatigue starts showing up. And then your ability to show true compassion and empathy is about zero. Then it's just going through the motions, and they know it. They'll know it. And they'll start dropping off, and then it's like, nah, this stinks. I don't want to do this anymore. You know, nobody cares. I tried, you know, so you're done. So compassion satisfaction is a real thing. You know, I hope that I feel it every week. That's what I always say to myself. I want to make sure that every week I feel it, that I do get satisfaction in a very, you know, not in an outcomes sense, but in a real personal, almost spiritual sense, that I feel like I'm doing the work God has called me to by serving others, but not in a kind of obligation that I have to do this and he forced me into this kind of thing, but that really it is life-giving, you know, that kind of. Now, you're going to feel that every day? No, okay? There are going to be real bad days, but that's any job. That's any job is like that. And so, but that you feel it regularly is the important thing, and that you watch that you're not feeling compassion fatigue. If you're feeling compassion fatigue, for goodness sakes, go take a vacation. I mean, that's the easiest first thing you can do. And then that may be enough just to kind of get you reset, but if you come back and you're still feeling it, then you need to start working through some of this stuff. All right, well, I will leave it at that. What time is it, 2:30? Oh, 8 minutes over again, that's excellent. So that's, for me, that's really good. My wife would come here and tell you, wow, they really cut him short on that. And so tonight, again, if I'm doing all right, which I seem to be, tonight I'd like to talk about kind of the biblical basis for working with those in distress. And we'll talk about, one of the things I find really interesting is this, what we teach. We know that people that are involved in faith communities, people that are involved in faith, are healthier than those who aren't, okay? But they do have to consider their faith important to their life. It can't just be that you just, hey, I want to be healthy, so I'll go to the church every Sunday and just sit there. But what we have found in more research is, from a mental health perspective, it's not just that you believe, it's what you've been taught to believe. There are different outcomes depending on what you have been taught about God. And I'm going to show you some of that tonight. So I will just tell you that, some of these theological presentations that some pastors present where God's pretty rough on you, the mental health outcomes of people that believe those images of God are pretty bad. So I'm going to show you some of that tonight. So, all right, we'll see you tonight. And the other thing is I'm happy to send all of these to Dale, all of these PowerPoints, and he can send these to you if you'd like them. You're welcome to have them. So I saw some of you taking pictures, but I'll send them to you.
Walk behind the speaker. It's better. It's easier on our ears. Thank you, Matt. So we're in this break, free time. There are things scheduled, whiteboards that are happening, a hike that Denny is doing, meeting out here in front of the building at 3:15. Take advantage of this time, enjoy each other's company, rest, take a nap, whatever you need to do. When we gather here at 7 o'clock tonight, Matt will be presenting, we'll have some worship, and we will also celebrate the Lord's table together. So that'll be how our evening ends. If you are leaving immediately after that, please find that feedback form and get that filled out for us. We really need that information from you, and leave it. It would be greatly appreciated. All right, let's go. Have a good afternoon. God be with you.